Well, it is great to see you guys this morning. As I said, I am very happy to be able to come and share a message with you this morning. And if you have your Bibles, you want to look ahead, we're going to be in the book of Judges. Chapter 14 is where we're going to start off this morning, so you can go ahead and turn there if you want. We're looking at a very interesting character from the Old Testament, a real guy, a guy who lived a long time ago. He was a man by the name of Samson. And if you missed last week, you can actually go online. Our messages are now online. You can go to our website or you can go to our Facebook page and you can see it there or share it with your friends or whatever. But Samson was, I'll just kind of give you the rundown of it. Samson was a guy that from his very birth, from the time he was born, he was set apart and called. He was actually chosen by God. He was chosen to help start the process of freeing God's people from the oppressive hand of the dreaded Philistines, basically their arch enemies all throughout Scripture. And so God gave this guy Samson this amazing supernatural strength, more than you could possibly even imagine. In fact, his strength is legendary. It's why every one of you have heard his name. You know his name even today because of that incredible strength. And even people who don't go to church, many of them have heard the story of Samson because it's just legendary. It's the stuff of legends. And so Samson had so much God-given potential. This is what we said last week, that just like us, Samson had this God-given potential for greatness. But the problem is, like so many of us, even though he was given this great potential by God, he struggled with a dangerously weak will. He really did. And he would go and he'd make these really goofy, self-destructive decisions over and over and over again. It seems like he never learned from his mistakes. And in fact, last week we kind of summarized his entire life. If you wanted one statement that talked about Samson and who he was in his life, we said that Samson was an incredibly strong person with a dangerously weak will. He had, both sides of the coin. Incredibly strong person, incredibly weak at the same time. And the reality is that's a pretty good description of him and us too, because each one of us have been given strength and potential from God. And like many of us, Samson had this weak will and he would give in to different temptations from time to time. He had this God-given potential for greatness, and yet because of the weakness of his will and the weakness of our own will at times, we also end up making really, really poor decisions that cost us down the line. Sometimes a long time down the line, sometimes right away. Decisions that can derail us. Really, these are decisions. We make our choices and we have to live with them. We make these decisions and it derails God's plan for our greatness. Stuff that God had planned for us, if you really understand the scriptures, since before we were even born, God had this goal, this idea of who he wanted us to be. And these poor decisions, they not only hurt us, but they also hurt people around us, people who care about us, people who want the best for us. And if you remember last week, we also talked about three of these really specific attitudes that we saw displayed in the life of Samson that will make any strong person weak. The first one was lust, and it's not just sexual lust, okay? It's really an unhealthy appetite, an unhealthy desire for something, anything. And it becomes first place in your life, and it's best kind of described with the phrase, I want it. You become consumed with that. I want it. And then we talked about a very pervasive attitude that you see all around us today, and that is the attitude of entitlement. And Samson, he had this as well. Like a lot of people today, he felt like, what? Not only do I want it, I deserve it. Right? You talk yourself into it. I deserve it. And finally, there was the attitude of pride, where Samson said, I know this is wrong, and I know I probably should avoid this because this could end really badly, but I'm not like other people. This won't be a problem for me because I'm strong and I can handle it. And Samson had all three of these attitudes going on in his life, and we watched as this very strong man became really, really weak. And today, we're going to look at another one of Samson's problems. And it also happens to be a problem for a lot of us. If you're taking notes, it's this. Here's our key thought for the week. Like so many of us, Samson chose to be controlled by his emotions rather than being led by the Spirit of God. Because you have that choice too. Bottom line, Samson gave in to his emotions over and over and over again. And listen, that's always a bad choice. Giving into your emotions, the emotions of the moment, can lead to disaster. For those of us that are Christians, we often say that we have decided that we will follow Christ, right? We say that. We're Christians, we're going to follow Christ. And one of our big problems is that we should be led by the Spirit of God. I mean, that's what we're saying. If we're going to be led by Christ, we're going to be led by the Spirit of God. But sadly, we often choose, just like Samson, to be controlled or driven by emotions. And some people say, well, this is just the way I am, you know. No, it's the way your emotions are. You have a choice in this stuff. We often give into or succumb to those strong emotions that can drive us totally in the wrong directions. And one of the challenges specifically for men is this. Men typically don't like to think of themselves as emotional. I mean, society has told us that, right? A lot of people think, well, you know, women, okay, they're okay being emotional, but men, we're not supposed to be emotional. We're not supposed to show any emotion. But that's a misconception, that women are emotional and men are strong and not emotional, because as a human being, all human beings, we were given emotions. We are all emotional beings as part of who we are, and we're emotional to some degree. And our emotions were given to us by God, who, by the way, displays many different emotions all throughout scriptures. If you don't believe me, look it up, right? Because God has emotions too. Emotions, they're not bad in and of themselves, but we shouldn't be controlled by them. We shouldn't be driven by them. We shouldn't make our choices based on our emotions. We should not allow ourselves to be slaves to our emotions, and a lot of people are. Now, even with that, the way that men process emotions and the way that women process their emotions, that is very, very different, right? That's just a fact. There's no doubt about that. Generally speaking, and I'm just speaking in generalities here, so if this isn't you, don't get all bent out of shape or anything like that. This is just kind of a given and an understanding that women, they talk about their emotions a lot. And men, generally, they don't talk so much. They just go out and act. They just respond, right? So not trying to be sexist or anything like that, not trying to be judgmental here. This is not my opinion. This is pretty much what every psychological study you can read will tell you, that women, they talk through their emotions and men just go out and try to do stuff. For example, women will, if a woman is upset about something, or they're working through something in their life, they got something going on, they typically have the desire, and it actually turns out they have this need. It's a real need to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, right? That's generally, not all the time, okay? But generally, that's how women process their emotions. They need to go through that for, various reasons. Now, men are a little bit different than that. They handle a little bit. Generally, we don't talk as much. We just try to fix it. How do I solve this situation? I'm upset about this. What can I do to fix this? We just go ahead and act. That's our first reaction to a problem or an issue. Men respond, what steps can I take? What plan can I formulate? Like, if my wife, Rosalba, is upset, she may typically call one of her lady friends, and she would say something along the lines of, hey, you want to come over and have some coffee, and we can just sit on my couch and talk for a little while? Would that be okay? You want to go do that? In my whole life, I've never had a guy call me and say, Robert, would you like to come over and sit on my coffee or sit on my couch and have some coffee and chit chat for a while? I mean, if he did, he probably wouldn't be my friend. That's weird, right? For a guy, that's kind of strange. Men are very different that we tend to just go out and do so. We don't talk as much. We just go out and do something. But the problem is, and be real honest here, men, don't leave me hanging. How many of you guys here would say that at some point in your life, at some point in some situation, your emotions have led you to act in a way of doing something that you probably shouldn't have done? Good. I'm not alone in this, right? Maybe even something that you go on to regret later in life, right? Because you acted out of your emotion. It happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. I'll tell you, I was driving home from Walmart. You guys know the Walmart here in town? I'm driving home from Walmart, and I'm driving back, not on the freeway. I'm staying with Patsy and Larry, and I could take the freeway down, but I wanted to drive through town, right? And I'm kind of praying for our town, right? I'm minding my own business, thinking about my sermon and how can I show God's love to people here in the community? I'm just kind of thinking about these things because I'm ministered to do that stuff, right? So and I have an issue. And I'll be really transparent and honest with you. When I'm driving, especially, and I might as well tell you right now, it's blinkers, turn signals. I have an issue with, it seems like almost no one uses them consistently or correctly other than me, right? It kind of feels like that. And I don't get it because it doesn't use more gas, right? It doesn't cost you anything to actually use your blinkers. It's just common courtesy. So I'm driving home through town, and I'm minding my own business, and a car weaves in front of me, just pulls over into my lane, and it looks like 3 high school boys probably, right? Pretty young guys, maybe a little bit older, but they cut in front of me, and they don't use their turn signals. And generally, how I respond to that is poorly. What I generally will do is I try to gently remind them that they do have these turn signals and they can use them. And I gently kind of try to educate them a little bit as how to use their turn signals, right? And so I pull up next to them and I say, use your blinkers, moron. You know, that's me. And these three young guys, they now start flipping me off. Right? They're giving me the bird. They're peeling the banana in my direction. And if you don't know, that also doesn't set well with me. And so they flip me off and my emotions are just raging at this point because I'm so upset. And so I immediately forget that I'm a Christian. I immediately forget that I'm a man of God that wants to show God's love to this community, right? All that stuff that just goes right off out the window. And now my emotions are really, and this took a split second for this to happen, and I become like a little child. I actually transform. I turn into like a little child, and I'm throwing a fit because these people cut me off. And so I'm in hot pursuit. I'm driving down the road, and I'm after these guys, and they're still flipping me off, right? So it's just got me going here. And now I'm sizing them up. I'm actually driving, and I'm getting close to them. I'm looking through the windows, and I'm thinking, how big are these guys? Right? Because and they look relatively small. They really did. So honest to goodness, in my mind, I'm kind of going through stuff thinking, well, I probably got like 30, 40 pounds on each one of them, you know? And I know I'm getting old, but come on, these odds are really good. These guys aren't trained or anything like that. And I'm not as good as I once was, but I think I can take them. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I can take them. I can take these guys. That's actually going through my mind. This scenario is playing out. And so I'm in hot pursuit. And so I'm weaving through traffic now too. And other people are flipping me off. And I'm thinking, I'll deal with you later, buddy. I got to take these three clowns first, right? Driving really fast until, thank God, suddenly it kind of clicks in, right? And I think, Robert, you know, what are the possibilities of this incident? Where do you see this going? How's this going to play out? How could this go down? And I thought, well, option one, I mean, there are possibilities here. Option one, they pull over, I jump out and beat the ever-loving snot out of all three of them, and I get arrested, and it becomes a big news story. And you guys fire me, right? Option two, we pull over, they whip the ever-loving snot out of me. Now it's a big embarrassing story, and you probably still fire me, right? Option three, either way, my wife is going to find out, and buddy, that's when I'm really going to be in trouble. And it was the third option that actually gave me the greatest pause. And I began to think about how this could... I'm telling you, I'm just being transparent here, folks. I'm just telling you. But I'm not alone in this, okay? I'm not alone, because I have talked with a lot of men who have this very same issue, that their emotions get going and they tend to just act. Strong emotions. We just act and we do these ungodly things, and we're not being led by the Spirit of God at all. We're being led by our emotions. And I think we want to do what's right, but what we will say is my emotions just took over. My emotions got the best of me. And I don't know what it would be for you guys. Maybe for some of you guys, maybe you're not like that. Maybe you don't lose your temper or anything like that. Maybe for you, it's something else. Maybe for you, it's a fear of failure or feeling or being perceived as being weak. And so you don't ever want to let people help you. You don't ever ask for help. Instead, you put on this false bravado. You put on this face of, I got it all under control. My life is going perfect. I don't need help from anyone, you know. Nothing seems to get to you. You don't want to feel vulnerable, so you don't let people get close to you. You got to keep them at a distance. Maybe even your spouse, you keep her at a distance because you don't want to hurt and you don't want to feel. Now, women, they process their emotions a little bit differently. They have strong emotions as well. But if we're talking about women, I know this, that women, they have emotions that can lead them down the wrong path as well. The feeling of insecurity for a woman, this is a really, really big one. Women have a need. They have an emotion. They want to feel secure in their life. They want to feel secure in their relationship. They want to feel secure in their finances and secure in their family and their health and all kinds of stuff. They want to feel security. And feeling insecure, the emotion of feeling insecure leads to stress and fear and all kinds of bad stuff. And the thing is, research has showed that in a woman's brain, the amygdala in a woman's brain, I mean, men have them too, but they react differently in this situation. Research has shown that the amygdala of a woman's brain, it actually processes emotions much differently than men's brains do. It turns out they really do need to talk about it. I learned this in physiology in the classes I took in college. And what research has shown is that a woman's brain, when they feel stress and they feel fear, that causes them to have actual physical symptoms. It turns out they do feel it. differently than a man feels it. And so talking through it, going over it again and again, helps them process those emotions. And they have to talk about it so they won't feel dissatisfied. Being dissatisfied about everything. And it begins to snowball. There's dissatisfied about this part of their life or that part of their life, their body image, everything. It just kind of all snowballs. And many relational problems stem from these feelings, these strong emotions of not feeling secure. And regardless of the cause, giving in to strong emotions can lead you to do something or say something that you will later regret. And you end up like Paul. The Apostle Paul talked about this in a letter he wrote to the Romans in chapter 7. Paul said this. He said, why is it that the things I intend to do, the things I want to do, I don't do those things? And the things that I don't want to do, I don't understand it, but I always end up doing them. It's like there's like a duality going on inside of me. For many of us, it's because we're allowing ourselves to be controlled by our emotions rather than being guided by the Spirit of God. And it doesn't happen automatically that you're going to be guided by the Spirit of God. You have to choose to listen to that voice. That's why Paul later on in Galatians, he wrote a letter to the church that he started in Galatia too. And he said this, so I say, let the Holy Spirit guide your lives. Then you won't be doing what the sinful nature wants to do. In verse 17, he says, because the sinful nature, you know what it wants to do? It wants to do what is evil, what is just the opposite of what the Spirit of God wants you to do. And the Spirit gives us desires that are the opposite of the sinful nature. These two forces, you need to know this. There's a war inside of you because these two forces, they're fighting each other. So you're not always free to carry out your good intentions. You may have the best of intentions, and yet you end up going in the opposite direction because of this battle that's going on. The problem for Samson, and frankly, the problem for so many of us today, is that we allow our emotions to take control, to lead us. Rather than choosing to be led by God, we're led by these strong emotions. We saw it play out in Samson's life. If you missed last week, I'll just kind of give you the highlight. Samson goes into enemy territory, right? Because he's not afraid of anybody. So he goes into enemy territory and he sees a girl. And she's very pretty, but she was from another tribe and she worshiped other gods. And this is long before the whole Delilah situation that we're going to get into, right? But this happens long before that. And so he said, well, you know what? She's pretty. Samson was a sucker for a pretty face. He said, I don't care that she's from another tribe. I don't care what God said about intermarrying. I don't care what my mom and dad think of it. She's pretty. I want her. I deserve her. I'm strong enough to handle it, whatever. And so he's kind of like at this bachelor party. Not like a bachelor, but kind of like a bachelor party that you might have today. Only this one goes on for like a week. It's a long celebration. He's having a big old keg party. And the wedding's going to go down in a few days. And because she's a Philistine woman, you got to know this, because she's a Philistine woman, there are Philistines there, right? He's actually in Philistine territory. So he's surrounded by these Philistines. And so he's hanging out. The Bible tells us he's hanging out with 30 Philistine warriors. And they're basically his enemy. But he says to these 30 guys, right? They're having a conversation, they're drinking. And he says, hey, how about we play a little game? I've got a little riddle for you. Let's have a battle of wits, right? Because everybody knows you get a group of guys together, they're going to compete somehow, right? And just to make it interesting, he says, let's put a wager on it. Let's bet something, because everybody knows if a man's competing, they got to have something to win. Otherwise, what's the point? And so he makes this really foolish bet with these 30 guys at the party. He says, I will bet each one of you a linen robe and a fine set of clothing that I'll win this bet. You won't be able to figure out my riddle, which, if you just think about it, is a pretty stupid bet, right? Because if he loses, he alone is on the hook for 30 linen robes and 30 fine sets of clothing. If the Philistine guys, if they lose, they only have to give one each, right? So it's kind of a stupid bet. But leaving that aside, he says, I'll give you guys a week. I'll give you a week to figure this riddle out. And before we look at the riddle, if you were with us last week, what kind of animal was it that Samson tore apart with his bare hands? A lion. Yeah, it was a lion. And what did Samson, in his Nazirite vow, what did he vow not to ever touch? Yeah, dead things, right? He's not supposed to touch dead things. So he's admiring his handiwork. He killed this lion. He comes back a little bit later. He saw that some bees had made a hive there and had some honey, and he wanted a little snack. So he scoops out the handful of nasty old lion carcass honey, and he decided to break his vow to God for nothing, for a snack, right? And that plays into this riddle. You need to know that. So keep that in mind. And in verse 14 of Judges, Samson says, here's his riddle, okay? Here's what he's going to say to these guys. Samson says, here's my riddle. Out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. What's he talking about? He's talking about the lion. Yeah, he's talking about the lion, the dead lion, and the honey, the nasty honey. You guys all see that, right? The strong and the eat and the eater and the eat and the sweet. That's the lion. And I don't know for sure. I'm guessing that he was going to pose this riddle, and then his plan was to take them out and show them, kind of show off. This is the lion I tore apart with my bare hands or whatever. Something like that. He was going to prove the riddle. I'm sure that was his intention. But for like 3 days, if you read this whole story, it's in chapter 14. You should read it because it's amazing. But for 3 days, these guys, they're racking their brains, you know. I mean, you got to figure some of them are kind of a dim bulb, but they're thinking about it, right? They're concerned, what could this be with it? They're trying to figure this out, and they couldn't. So the Philistine guys are getting angry now. They're losing this bet to this foreign guy. And so they go to the hot Philistine babe, the fiance. They go to the girl. And what they do is they say, you need to get us this answer. Your fiance knows the answer to this. You need to trick him or do whatever you have to do and get this answer for us. And if you don't, we're going to burn you alive and your father for good measure. They threaten her, right? And that's what they say. They basically force her to go and try to get this answer. So the bride-to-be, she's now going to use a weapon, a woman's weapon that has been used for years and years and years because it works. She's going to cry. And so what she does, the Bible tells us that for days, right? It works every time. And so she says, you don't love me. You don't care about me. You don't trust me. If you did, you'd tell me the secret to your riddle. Just tell me the secret. So finally, Samson, he's had enough. He relents. Right? He gives in. He can't take it anymore, so he tells her the secret. She promptly then goes, she's in fear for her own life. She goes and she tells these guys, and we pick up, that's kind of the overview, but here's where we pick it up in Scripture. Before sunset on the seventh day, right, because he gave him 7 days to solve it. Before sunset, they wait till the last day, right, and they go to him, and here's the answer. And kind of in jeopardy for him, they say, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And so now Samson is furious. And he can't believe they got the answer. These clowns have figured out his riddle, and he lost the bet. So he's all embarrassed. He gets really angry, and he said to them one of the strangest statements I've ever seen in all of Scripture. This is what he says to them. He said, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. That's exactly what he said. That was his response. You can laugh if you want to. That sounds kind of funny. What a strange statement, right? As a diligent pastor, though, I did look this up in the original Hebrew because I thought there has to be something to this. And you know what Samson was really saying when he made this statement? This is what it really means. Literally, this is what that statement means. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. It's exactly what it means. It just that's it. That's what he said. There's no other deeper meaning. And I thought, well, I got to come up with something for that. So I thought about it. I thought about it for a little while. I gave it some thought. And I think of at least two things that specifically men you can take away from this particular statement. So gentlemen, number one, I guess, don't ever let anybody plow with your heifer. Seems like that's not a good idea. And number two, don't ever call your wife or girlfriend a heifer, right? That's probably unwise. But that's what happened. And so now we get to watch as Samson, his emotions again begin to stir. It's one of his weaknesses, and he gives into it. And he chooses to give into the emotion of anger. And rather than being guided by the Spirit of God, he reacts with strong emotion. He completely is controlled by his emotion. Now he's not listening to God at all. And you're going to see a couple of different emotions here. And maybe you can relate to some of them. The first one, I think, is this one that I display when people are driving badly. And Samson burned with anger. Like he went from 0 to 60 like that. He's really upset. Samson is consumed with anger. In verse 19, in the middle of the verse, it says this. Samson went down to the town of Ascalon, and he killed 30 men. He killed 30 men, and he stole their belongings, and he gave their clothing to the men who had solved the riddle. So in his rage, he went and took the lives of 30 basically innocent men. They never did anything to him. He didn't even know them, and he did it so he could steal their clothing. That's what he did. And then it says that Samson was still furious about what had happened, and so he went home. He went home to live with his mom and dad. He left, and he went home. Meanwhile, in verse 20, so his wife, the girl that was the hot girl that he was going to marry, she was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. You might be thinking, what a strange story this is. Look, folks, we're just getting started, right? There's a couple more weeks of this. You're going to see some amazing things, but let me explain. Actually, there's too much to explain. As Inigo Montoya would say of Princess Bride, anybody seen Princess Bride? There's too much to explain. Let me sum up. And so the story continues here. And Samson, he lost the stupid bet before the wedding ceremony had even started. So he ran off to kill these 30 innocent men and steal their stuff and pay his bet. And so he steals their clothing, and he's still upset about all of this, so he goes home. Now, a little bit later, he cools off, right? This is how it works, right, guys? A little bit later, he starts to think about it. He's thinking about the girl, and he's thinking about this beautiful girl he was going to marry, and so maybe he gets her some flowers. Maybe he goes and gets some candy or whatever. He heads towards her house. He's going to turn on the charm. He's going to try to romance her a little bit. But now the dad, the bride's father, has to tell him, well, this is kind of embarrassing, but please, Samson, understand. We already had paid for this big old party. It was a huge party. All our friends were there. All our guests were there. And as strange as it sounds to us today, it wouldn't have been strange at all at this point. The father said, well, she's of marrying age, and there are some guys here. Let's just give her to another man. And that's what they did. That's what he did. That's exactly what happened. You can only imagine now, Samson, who's a hothead to begin with, right? How's he going to, he lost a bet and he killed 30 innocent men. How's this going to work when he finds out the beautiful girl is now somebody else's wife, and he's in a really bad mood, and he goes into another rage. And again, he allows himself to be totally controlled by his emotions. So now he's really, really bad. And now he wants revenge, another very powerful emotion that you should never let control you. And so what he did, don't tell PETA, right, the people for ethical treatment of animals, but what he does is he gets 300 foxes, and he ties them together. He ties their tails together, and he puts a torch in their tails, and he lights it on fire. This is an unbelievably cruel story, but he lights it on fire, and he lets the animals go where the crops were growing all around this town. So imagine the chaos now. 150 pairs of poor foxes with their tails on fire, running around like crazy. And so now Samson, for all practical purposes, he's burned their fields and their crop. He's ruined their entire economy for the year. Well, guess what the Philistines do now? Well, they're furious, and they want revenge as well. So they went and they burned that beautiful woman to death, and her father, for good measure. They killed the two of them, burned them alive and killed them. And we see we're going to see so many times in this tragic story. And it really is a tragic story. Samson's emotion cost him so much. It hurt not only him, it hurt people all around him, just as it often does to those of us who allow ourselves to be controlled by strong emotions as well. It hardly, it doesn't work out well. And here's the challenge for many of us. Anger is almost our default reaction. We almost, like I say, we go from zero to anger in a second. For example, if somebody embarrasses me, I'm not only embarrassed, I'm also mad, right? I'll feel embarrassed, but I'll also feel angry. They're going to be sorry they ever did that. I tell you what, I'm going to get them back, right? That starts right away. And it's as simple as a guy who, think of a guy. When a guy stubs his toe, what does he do? He gets really, really mad. Now, a woman, she might stub her toe and she'll sit down on that chair and she'll begin to nurse her toe. But a guy will turn around and kick it a second time, right? Because that stupid chair, I'm going to show it, right? Because for many of us, anger is our default automatic emotion. But just think about this for a moment. Why was Samson so angry at everybody else? I mean, he was the one, right? This is mostly, whose fault is all of this? It's Samson's fault, right? It is his fault because he's the one who went and pursued the wrong woman, isn't he? I mean, he wasn't supposed to. He's the one who decided to marry her, even though God told him not to and his parents really told him not to. He's the one who chose to marry. He's the one who ignored his parents' advice and God's advice. He's the one who taunted the Philistines with his stupid riddle. He's the one who knew the secret. He was the only one who knew the secret, and yet he's the one who gave the secret away, right? He's the one who left his wife at the altar to go and kill some innocent men so he could pay off his bet with stuff he had stolen. He's the one who burned the villages, right? In rage. In other words, he's mad at the whole world, but it's really his fault. A lot of this he brought onto himself. He made choices, and those choices had consequences, and that's where so many of us end up living, no matter whether you're a man or a woman. If you choose to be controlled by your emotions, and you get angry at somebody, and you let that control, we get angry at the world, we get angry sometimes at God, and it could be anything, but you begin to think things like this, like you think, well, you know what, I really hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate that I'm broke all the time, when in reality, if you look at it dispassionately, you will begin to see that a lot of times, you're the one who chose not to go to school or to get that training. You're the one who didn't go to college. You're the one who took a job that was beneath you because you wanted to have a job, and you really should be mad at yourself, but you're taking it out. You're trying to take it out on other people, or like my spouse won't meet my needs. They're never there for me. And so never mind that you're not meeting their needs either, right? Because it's a partnership, and you both need to be giving to each other as Christ gave for the church. The relationship is just lousy, you begin to think, because the reality is you haven't met each other's needs. And neither one of you is really even trying. And you're mad at the other one, but you really need to be, you're just as guilty in this matter. I'm mad at God. God, I can't believe you let me end up in this place. God, I can't believe that you're letting me go through this. When the truth is, you're where you are because of your own choices many times. I am my own worst enemy. I can get mad at people all the time, but oftentimes it's caused by me. And you end up blaming other people or blaming God. It's that, maybe you just need to own it. Maybe you need to own it. And I have had to own it at different times in my life because I end up being driven by strong emotions rather than being led by God. And so just be honest. Just be honest. I'm thinking, that maybe there needs to be some apologies in your life. Maybe if you'll think about your situation, you may be unsatisfied with it, and I understand that, but maybe you've made it worse with the way you've treated people. So maybe you need to apologize. Maybe, kids, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I haven't been there for you, and I've taken it out on you. I've been a bad dad. I've been a bad husband because I'm so angry about things that have happened. So there may be some apologies that need to take place. And no excuses, just, I haven't treated you the way I should be treating you. I haven't followed you the way I have been, should be following you. I haven't made the choices I should have made, and now I'm living with the consequences, and I need you to forgive me. I want to be a faithful man of God. I want to be a faithful woman of God. God, I want to be led by your Spirit and not totally controlled by my emotions. The first emotional problem was that he burned with anger. The second one, again, we see that he was filled with pride. Samson was a very prideful, and you can imagine why, right? I mean, he could beat up anybody. He was the strongest man alive, but he's filled with his pride, and he's still dealing with his anger. And so he goes out because of what they did, and God blessed him with so much strength. This is what he did. In verse 15, it says this. It says, then he found Samson, he's angry because his wife married somebody else, and then they killed her. And so he found the jawbone. This is a very famous story. You probably heard it in Sunday school. He killed 1,000 men. He found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey. He picked it up, and with it, he killed 1,000 Philistines with this jawbone. Now, we can just pause for a moment and be honest. That's amazing. Isn't that flat out? This is like Ultimate Fighting Championship on steroids, plus God, right? This is an amazing feat. This is an amazing thing. Honestly, I know on a good day, I probably could have taken those 3 scrawny high school kids, right? Not all high school kids, because some of them are pretty big, right? But those snotty little ones that were flipping me off, I could have taken them. I know I could have. But here what we see is Samson, he's using the blessing that God gave him, this amazing strength, and he takes down 1,000 men all at one time. But watch who's now going to try to take credit for it. This is what, after he killed them, this is what Samson says. He says, with the jawbone of a donkey, I've piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. He's basically saying, yo, I'm the man, right? I mean, I killed 1,000 men all by myself. I am one bad man pajama. Don't you think I'm awesome? I mean, what we see here is a man with a clear case of pride, right? He's very, very proud of what he's done. Just like he was with the lion, he's just kind of admiring his handiwork. Look at me in my bad self. I'm the guy. Don't you admire me? Don't you think I'm great? Have I impressed you? Scripture says that God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to who? The humble, right? And so Samson's in a totally different position here. Scripture says that pride comes before a fall. And Samson had to deal with this. And sadly, tragically, a lot of people also have to find out that truth the hard way. And it's always a tough thing to go through. I've gone through it. But when you realize that every blessing that you have in your life, your talent, your skills, your intellect, all of the things that are blessings in your life, God gave them to you. God fashioned you and gave you all of those things. And rather than being sucked into the trap of pride and anger, it all starts with an understanding that God loves you and he wants the best for you. And he's given you exactly what you need to be everything he called you to be. And you see, often we pursue all kinds of things in an attempt to find the answer to that hunger. Because there's a hunger inside of each one of us. We all feel like there must be something more. I heard one man say that God has placed a God-shaped hole inside of each one of us. And we know there's something to fill that. And so we go around searching for things to fill that because it hurts that it's empty. We have a hole in our heart, and it hurts when the wind blows through it. And so we try to fill that with all kinds of things. But anything other than God will never satisfy. If you think there's something I could have, and if I have that, then my life will be complete, you are completely wrong. Because it'll always be the need for something more until you find God. But here's my final thought for the day. If you turn to God, what you will find is that God will meet your deepest need. And he knows exactly what it is. If you will submit to God, God will meet your deepest need. If you humble yourself and turn to God, you will get that need met. And this is what happens in Samson's life, and very, very quickly too. So he kills 1,000 men. Samson knows, you know what? There's no doubt about it now. I am Philistine public enemy number one. They're going to come after me with more than 1,000 guys. I mean, 1,000 guys, that was tough, but maybe they come at me with 5,000 or whatever. And they're either going to kill me or, you know what? I'm going to die of thirst out here in the middle of this desert. I'm so thirsty, I feel like I'm going to die right now. And here's what he does. He lets his need for water kind of drive him towards God. For the first time, really, this is the first time you see Samson turning to God. And in verse 18, it says this, because he was so thirsty, because he had a need, he cried out to God. Isn't that how that works sometimes? Because he was thirsty, he cried out to the Lord. No longer is he full of pride. He's now kind of humble. And he's saying, the conversation changes. He now attributes to God. He says, you, God, have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. But now must I die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans. No longer is he saying, hey, look at what I've done. Look at what I've accomplished. It's now an acknowledgement that his blessings, his strength came from God, and he needs God to rescue him. And in verse 19, because of this newfound humility, the first time we see it in him, God caused water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at a place called Lehi. He turned to God in honesty and sincerity, and God met his need. And Samson drank and was revived, and his strength returned. A complete miracle, right? Nothing. It's just a complete miracle. With God, nothing is impossible. God met his deepest need. When you turn to God, your strength will also return. It really will. Not just your strength, though. It's his strength that returns. It's his strength that we actually need. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. And you will be revived. In other words, guess what? You come back to life too. You become, you can still be who God created you to be. You're still breathing air. You're still converting oxygen to CO2, right? You're still alive. You still have a chance to be everything God called you to be. And it's never too late to be who you might have been with God, because he can revive you. He can make you different. He can make you a leader. He can make you live more righteously. You can be the person that God actually called you to be when you let go of the strong emotions that often are pulling us in the opposite direction of God, and they're controlling your life, and you turn to God. He will meet your deepest need. Isn't that great news? Isn't that great news? The world has yet to see what one person can do that is totally committed to God. You could be that person. We can. Each one of us, we get to make that choice each week. I'm going to have the praise team come up, and they're going to sing a closing song, and then we'll pray and